This guy thought that the jungle was just a big forest with beautiful plants and cute animals. But it turned out that the Amazon is like a computer game on the hardest level. One mistake, and your hero's journey ends. Yossi Ginsberg, a young man from Israel, loved to travel. At the end of the 20th century, he went to Bolivia. He dreamed of walking through the Amazon jungle. At the beginning of his journey, Yossi met a cheerful man named Marcus, who worked as a teacher in Sweden. They became good friends, traveling together and living in a camp with other tourists. During another excursion, Marcus met his good friend Kevin, a famous photographer from the USA and a true legend among travelers. This man had walked all over South America on foot, taking amazing photographs along the way. That evening, the friends drank in a local pub. A stranger asked Marcus and his friends to go back home because it was too dangerous there. But Yossi didn't want to go home because he really liked one of the local girls. They took some strange drink together, and soon Yossi began to have very beautiful hallucinations. The next morning, Yossi and his girlfriend lay together in a hammock reading a book. He complained that his father didn't approve of his passion and considered traveling a meaningless waste of time. Soon, Yossi, Marcus, and Kevin set out on another excursion. They decided to spend some time at the hostel of the Israeli community called La Paz. At this time, a grand carnival was happening in Bolivia. The heroes wandered around the market. A stranger asked Yossi, "Are you American?" He answered, "No," and got acquainted with the man. His name was Carl, and he came from Austria. Carl told about his travels and said that indigenous people still live in the Amazon jungle. He personally knew one native tribe. Yossi suggested to his companions that they go into the jungle together with Carl. A chance to explore unknown places and meet wild peoples personally. At first, Marcus and Kevin refused, but Yossi persuaded them to change their minds. An opportunity like this comes once in a lifetime. They would become true conquerors of the jungle. The next day, all the heroes met at a shop to buy supplies for the journey. Yossi wanted to take his talisman with him, an old book of his grandfather. Soon, the men flew to Apollo because that was where their big journey began. During the night, Marcus woke up to strange sounds. It seemed like someone had entered his tent, maybe a bat or a night moth. The guys teased their friend about it. That evening, heavy rain began. The tourists dried their wet clothes by the fire, hoping the weather would improve soon. The next day, they continued their journey. It was very difficult for the men to move through the dense jungle, especially with heavy backpacks. At some point, they lost track of Carl. Marcus admitted that he was not happy with this trip and wished to return home. It was very hard and frightening for him. Soon, the guys found Carl again and continued forward. They reached a village. Indigenous people actually lived there. The heroes could bathe, rest, eat, and communicate with the locals. Marcus had some knowledge of medicine, so he treated the local children. Almost all of them had large calluses on their feet. Soon, the heroes continued their journey. Kevin took many beautiful photos. Carl said that humans had become a cancerous tumor on our planet. They destroy nature, and for that, they must be eliminated. Spotting a monkey on one of the branches, Carl used a rifle, then a stick. He boasted that for dinner they would have the most delicious meat in the world. But only Carl liked this meat. Marcus felt nauseous from it. The next day, Marcus stumbled and fell. It was very hard for him to continue. It turned out that his feet were covered with red sores. Kevin and Yossi were very displeased that they had brought Marcus along. Because of him, they had to move much slower and might not make it back before the rainy season began. The sores on Marcus's feet got even worse. Yossi, Kevin, and Carl discussed what to do next. Carl wanted to leave everyone and go alone to seek help. Kevin and Yossi did not agree with this plan. Marcus approached them. Kevin suggested building a raft to travel down the river. That way they could move much faster, and it would be easier for Marcus. The heroes started chopping and gathering logs. Yossi was bitten by a bullet ant. Very painful and unpleasant. Luckily, these insects are not poisonous. Soon they built a homemade raft. Carl declared himself captain, and the men set off on the water. At first, the journey went easily and cheerfully. Yossi and his companions admired the beautiful landscapes. But then the river was filled with rocks and rapids. Their journey became incredibly dangerous. The men constantly argued about where to go next and how not to break the raft. They approached the shore. Carl and Kevin continued arguing. Angry, Carl went hunting. Kevin told his friends that Carl looked very frightened on the raft, meaning he could not swim. Yossi went searching for Carl. He feared that Carl would abandon them in the jungle, leaving them completely alone. However, Carl did not leave. He pretended to be hunting a jaguar. The next day, Carl refused to travel on the raft. He wanted to return home. Yossi and Kevin, on the contrary, dreamed of continuing their journey, but they realized that Marcus could not travel with them. Then, the men made a difficult decision. Carl and Marcus had to stop their journey and return on foot. In 3 days, they would reach the nearest village and from there get back to the La Paz community. Yossi and Kevin said goodbye to Carl and Marcus and continued drifting down the river. Now their journey was much faster and more enjoyable, and most importantly, without scandals and quarrels. Both men were experienced travelers and were not afraid of difficulties. However, the next day the situation changed. Their homemade raft was caught in a strong current and floated onto rocky reefs. Yossi and Kevin rowed with all their strength, but the raft still got stuck on a rock in the middle of sharp rapids. Kevin decided to swim to the shore and asked Yossi to throw him the machetes. Yossi tried to do it, but he slipped from the raft and was swept away by the strong current. Yossi swam underwater for a long time, hitting sharp stones several times. One of these blows caused a head injury, and he almost lost consciousness. By a miracle, he managed to surface and grab a large piece of rock. With the last of his strength, he pulled himself onto the shore and collapsed on the ground. Yossi didn't know where he was. All his clothes were dirty and wet. In the evening, when it started raining, he hid in a small cave. In the morning, Yossi climbed out of the cave and noticed his backpack in the river. He immediately jumped into the water and retrieved it. Now his chances of survival increased. Yossi took one of his pills and tried to search for Kevin. Alas, his companion was nowhere to be seen. It seemed that the current had carried him very far. Yossi wrote a note for Kevin in his notebook. He stated that he would go to the village of Kurilai or Runa Bahe. Several days passed. Yossi noticed a fruit tree with ripe fruits and climbed it. But in the hollow he saw a poisonous snake. Hungrier than afraid, Yossi threw the snake to the ground and grabbed a sharp stone. At night, Yossi had to spend the night right in the middle of the jungle. It was very frightening. He dreamed a vivid dream in which he was eating at McDonald's. But suddenly, a huge bull appeared in the restaurant. Yossi woke up in horror and could not sleep until morning. At dawn, he set out again. He needed to reach the nearest village as soon as possible. During the night, Yossi began to have hallucinations. He saw Marcus and heard his voice. Yossi understood that this was caused by hunger, fear, and exhaustion. But there really was someone there. Some predator. Yossi grabbed a lighter and a canister of flammable liquid. With the help of fire, he managed to scare the predator away and avoid becoming someone's dinner. A new day came. Yossi realized that some kind of worm had settled in his forehead, and he removed it using his tweezers. The jungle was full of various animals and insects, many of them very dangerous. But Yossi had to keep going no matter what. He found a nest with some eggs and ate their contents. He shouted, hoping someone would hear him and come to help. But it seemed he was completely alone. He came across the ruins of a village. Yossi looked at the map in despair. It seemed this was the village of Kurilai, meaning he needed to go to another village, Ruri Nabake. The journey there would take several more days. Yossi noticed that his feet were also covered in wounds. Now he understood what Marcus had felt. He continued forward despite the pain and exhaustion. At some point, he realized he had lost his way and returned back. Yossi had a panic attack. He remembered his strict father, who wanted his son to enroll in university in the law faculty. But Yossi refused and started traveling. Now he regretted his decision. He had been wandering through the jungle for many days, sometimes walking in rain and thunderstorms. Yossi had vivid dreams, always including the sweet girl from the camp whom he liked very much. But these dreams always ended badly. Two men from a neighboring town walked along the river and found the exhausted Kevin on the shore. They took him to the village of Runabaki, where about 100 people lived. Kevin begged the locals to save his friend. They flew over the jungle in a plane, but could not descend low enough to see the entire area. Yossi saw the plane in the sky, but the pilots did not notice him. Local authorities in Runabake did not believe they could find Yossi, but Kevin believed they could. He approached a man named Daiko, a local tracker and boatman, and asked for his help. Kevin wanted to buy a boat from him. Daiko agreed to search for Yossi together with Kevin. Meanwhile, Yossi was still wandering through the jungle. He met a girl. an indigenous woman who did not speak English. Yossi used gestures to show that he needed help, but it seemed this woman was also lost. Yossi promised to protect her from predators. They spent the night together in the jungle, and in the morning, they set off again. Yossi found a slightly rotten coconut and offered it to the girl. She screamed that it was not to be eaten. They slept next to each other at night to stay somewhat warmer. The problem was, this girl was also a hallucination. Soon, Yossi realized this himself. Despite this, he continued his journey. His hallucinations became even stronger. Because of them, Yossi ended up in a swamp, immersing himself in dirty water up to his neck. He thought it was the end, but noticed the book given by his grandfather and continued to fight for his life. Using the strong leaves of local plants, Yossi reached dry land. Unfortunately, his backpack remained in the swamp, and it was impossible to retrieve it. Yossi removed his dirty clothes. He looked like a real skeleton. He shook off many bullet ants, which immediately began biting him. This caused new hallucinations, so numerous that he confused reality and fantasy. Exhausted, Yossi crawled to the river and fell onto the rocks. He had been wandering in the jungle for about 2 weeks. Yossi noticed a turtle on the shore and grabbed a stone, but then threw it away, telling the turtle he wouldn't harm it. He looked at the stars and saw a huge blue butterfly in the sky. He whispered, "Thank you," and closed his eyes. Kevin and Deco continued searching for Yossi. Deco said they could not go further and had to return. They got into a boat and started rowing. Yossi woke up and saw the boat. He crawled to the shore and whispered, "Stop!" Alas, no one heard him. With the last of his strength, Yossi got up and whispered, "Kevin!" At that moment, Kevin turned around and saw his friend. Yossi was saved, he would live. The exhausted and weakened Yossi was taken to Rura-Nabake. The locals were very surprised that this man had managed to survive. He had wandered through the jungle for 19 days. It was revealed that Carl had been a fraudster. He had lured tourists into dangerous expeditions. The police had been looking for him for a long time. Carl and Marcus never returned to La Paz. No one ever saw them again. This is a true story, and it is dedicated to the memory of Marcus.